Hey everyone, I'm Simone, and tonight on Signal, there is a lot of news pouring out of Washington right now, including the resignation of a key cabinet member and a potential government shutdown. Also, some men's rights activists are claiming Title IX isn't actually creating equality for women. Instead, they say it's now hurting men. And as Americans across the country prepare to sit down with their families over nice holiday meals, we'll help you navigate what's okay to talk about and what's off the table. But first, when we woke up this morning, we were all but certain there wasn't going to be a government shutdown going into the Christmas holiday. But what a difference a day can make. We've got NBC's Frank Thorpe with us from Capitol Hill to talk us through this roller coaster of a day. Frank, I have been hearing words like epic meltdown and chaos. Can you just describe where we are in the process right now and what are the possible outcomes?
Yeah, those are accurate descriptions because, I mean, right now, nobody really knows what's going to happen. And as soon as about, 6 hours ago, we had a better idea. We actually thought that we were kind of gliding to a easy outcome here. But now it's a situation where we're actually not sure what's going to happen. The House right now, they just passed, we were watching the floor here. So just to give you an idea of where we are, I'm actually in the Senate booth in the Capitol, in the U.S. Capitol building. The NBC has their own little space here. I'm sitting here with our TVs. We're watching the House floor, keeping an eye on Twitter and making sure that we know what's going on. It's happening right now. So the House just passed a procedural motion. The vote was 221 to 179. That actually got us to what could be the Republican alternative to a CR to fund the government till February 8th. If nothing is passed by the end of the day tomorrow, we're going to have a partial government shutdown. That is the bottom line. The Senate last night passed something by voice vote, basically unanimously, to stop that partial government shutdown from happening. It was a clean bill. It has no extra funding for the border wall that Trump has been asking for. It's just a clean bill to keep the government open until February 8th so that those negotiations can continue and the government doesn't shut down over Christmas. They sent that over to the House late last night, and now the House has basically decided we can't pass that. The House Republican leadership went to the White House today, and President Trump said he wouldn't sign that bill, that he wouldn't accept that bill without some extra money tacked on to go for the border funding. So what's happening now is Republicans are figuring out whether or not they can even pass a bill that would add that additional money on for the border funds. The thing is that we don't know if they have the votes. So we're trying to figure that out. It's actually, that vote might happen within minutes here. So we're keeping an eye on it for sure.
So one of the challenges, of course, that President Trump is facing right now as he's trying to make good on this campaign promise of funding a border wall is that most of Congress is at home at this point. And I'm hearing that everyone kind of walked into work this morning like with that cheery holiday spirit, thinking everything was cool. It's going to be a low-key day at work. What's the mood on Capitol Hill right now?
It's pretty dismal. I mean, here's the thing, with the Christmas spirit, last night when the Senate voted on this bill, they were literally singing Christmas carols on the floor. There was a group of Senate Democrats who were actually singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer as this was happening. There was all this kind of sense that we were all going to be going home by the end of the week. It's a little bit more confusing now, and people are a little nervous about what can happen, because the thing is that, even if the House is able to pass this bill with this extra border funding added to it, it's going to get sent back to the Senate, and it's not going to pass. You need 60 votes in the Senate, the way that it works. There's only 51 Republicans, and there are not 9 Senate Democrats that are going to vote to support adding any of this border wall funding on there. So you have a situation where it's not really there is no real easy end in sight right now if President Trump decides not to support a CR, this straight, clean bill that doesn't have any extra funding for the border. Also, I mean, we have a situation here where, most senators went home. I mean, 50% of the senators, we think, have gone home. A lot of them are getting calls now from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, a Republican from Kentucky. He's saying, hey, we might need you guys back here tomorrow by noon to vote on something that the House passes. But again, that's not going to pass. Step back even more. The president is supposed to be going to Mar-a-Lago tomorrow. But right now, the White House has said that they've indicated that he's actually not going to go to Mar-a-Lago if there is actually a shutdown. At the moment, a shutdown looks completely like a viable option here. If nobody decides to let up, we're headed towards a shutdown.
So let's talk about what would happen if that does, become what we see here. So if the government doesn't reopen until January 3rd, what's closed and who's affected by this? So, of course, I want to hear about the hundreds of thousands of government employees whose paychecks could be affected. But selfishly, I do want to ask you if my Amazon Prime deliveries will be affected by this. My holiday gift.
So the Postal Service won't be affected. You'll still get your deliveries. Christmas will not be ruined. I mean, Christmas will be ruined for all the staffers that have to sit around on Capitol Hill and try to work this out. And the people at the White House and people like us who have to actually cover it. But you'll be getting your packages. Your parents will be getting their packages. The big thing that is, it's actually kind of unclear, to be perfectly honest. This is a little bit of a uncharted territory with how small this shutdown is going to be. It's only 25% of government funding that's going to be actually affected by this, not to mention the fact that it's happening during a holiday season. So, a lot of the federal government is closed during Christmas anyways. We're going into a weekend. The federal government typically doesn't operate that much on the weekend that much. You have, the national parks, for instance, are not going to be staffed. The Smithsonian museums won't be open during a shutdown. You also have, like EPA and FDA inspections that'll be kind of like curtailed and slowed down. You will have up to hundreds of thousands of federal workers who will be furloughed. Those folks who are actually working that are deemed essential, their paychecks will be delayed. They won't be getting paid while the shutdown is actually happening. But the reality here is also, we're going into the new year. The new year brings a new Congress. The new Congress brings a new Democratic majority in the House. And Nancy Pelosi, who is expected to be the next Speaker of the House, has said that if the shutdown happens and it goes all the way until the next year, it's a situation where she would just come back and pass this clean CR, basically pass the bill that the Senate just passed. So, even Republicans are kind of admitting here that President Trump does not have that much leverage in this situation because in the end, Democrats are taking the House in just over a week.
Well, Frank, thank you so much. I hope that you have enough coffee there with you on your Capitol Hill bunker. You're going to need it.
Plenty of coffee. Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Okay, good. All right. And as if a looming shutdown isn't enough news for today, well, earlier this evening, President Trump announced in a tweet that Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis will be retiring at the end of February. Trump praised the Pentagon chief for his 2 years of service and said a new secretary will be named shortly. But this announcement, of course, comes the day after Trump abruptly announced also on Twitter that he would be withdrawing all U.S. troops from Syria. And even though Trump's announcement said Mattis served with distinction, Mattis's resignation letter began circulating soon after that, which is distinct in its shade. Let's look at some of the highlights. So he said, quote, "We cannot protect our interests or serve that role effectively without maintaining strong alliances and showing respect to those allies. And, quote, because you have the right to have a Secretary of Defense whose views are better aligned with yours on these and other subjects, I believe it is right for me to step down from my position." Let's just let that marinate for a second. And all this comes in the midst of several precarious national security challenges and shakeups in the administration, with transitions underway for the chief of staff, attorney general, and ambassador to the UN. So going back to that Syria decision, yesterday, Trump announced the move and posted a video explaining his thought process.
We've been fighting for a long time in Syria. I've been president for almost 2 years, and we've really stepped it up. And we have won against ISIS.
So mission accomplished? Well, not exactly. A lot of elected officials, both Republicans and Democrats, are not happy about it. They say the decision could pave the way for an ISIS comeback. And they say the real winners here are Iran, Russia, and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. NBC's Keir Simmons is here to help us understand what happens next. Okay, Keir, we know that Trump has long wanted to pull out of Syria.
Yeah.
And he's defending his decision to withdraw by saying that we've defeated ISIS in the region. But even people within his own party, within his own administration, are saying that that conclusion might be premature. What's the truth on the ground?
Has he defeated ISIS? Has America defeated ISIS? Well, I guess, there are multiple, as ever, always, there are multiple answers to that. I mean, one is, ISIS is a lot weaker than it was. Obviously, you'll remember that it had a caliphate land, actual territory. It doesn't really have that anymore, apart from perhaps a very tiny piece of space. Having said that, on the other hand, of course, ISIS in many ways is an ideology, it's an idea. Has that been defeated? No, it hasn't. And actually, you'll remember that ISIS grew out of Al-Qaeda, which itself was an idea. So in a way, you could say it doesn't really matter what the name is. The problem is the actual notion. And one of the questions about America withdrawing from the region like this is, does it just, if you like, fuel people's resentment and unhappiness? And does that fuel the notion of ISIS? Do we see either ISIS or another version of ISIS rise up like a kind of phoenix from the flames?
Let's talk about Russia for a second, right? So Russia's happy with this decision. Putin said that American troops didn't even belong there in the first place.
Yes, could hardly hold back his excitement. Yes,
exactly. But us withdrawing from the region, what does this do for our standing with our international allies and with our allies in the region, too?
Yeah, I mean, look, Putin says that he is pleased, that he agrees with the decision. He says he agrees with the president. Generally, he, at the same time, and interestingly, was kind of trolling President Trump, saying, you know, we'll see if the Americans really do withdraw. What it means for our allies are very disappointed, particularly the Kurds, who are a relatively small group who've supported America through the fight against ISIS. They are spread around the region, but there is a large group of them in Syria. They've controlled that area. America pulling out kind of throws the Kurds to the wolves. So effectively, America's turning back on a crucial ally there. Other allies don't like that. I mean, as ever, the Middle East is an incredibly complicated place. So Turkey, an American ally, is pleased. It's what they wanted. Now, you'll remember that Turkey's has been putting pressure on Saudi Arabia. It's so complicated, it's hard to get the words out. Has been putting pressure on Saudi Arabia. Maybe there's a deal here that's being done with Turkey to say, you take the pressure of Saudi Arabia, we'll pull out of Syria the way you want it.
So let's look at what the landscape would look like going forward. Without the U.S. supporting moderate rebels in Syria, you have Russia and Iran backing Assad's authoritarian regime. So what happens next? I mean, what's the worst case scenario here?
Yeah, I mean, what's most likely to happen is that Iran, Turkey will get into the room, and Russia will get into a room together and kind of divide things up and plan how things should go forward. Of course, the worst case scenario is that those different sides end up in conflict with each other because, for example, if Turkey invades Syria to take over those Kurdish areas, that will be an affront to the Iranians and to the Assad government in Damascus. So you could see a conflict. The more likely thing, though, is that a deal is done and that American influence in the region is severely weakened by that, because, of course, who's not in the room doing that deal? The Americans aren't in the room doing that deal.
Right, right. Kieran, thank you so much for putting everything into perspective for us.
It's a pleasure.
It's going to be interesting to see that timeline for that withdrawal that Trump is requesting. Okay, the Department of Education is investigating 4 colleges after complaints allege they discriminate against male students. 3 of those were sparked by one student who's pushing to end women-only scholarships and programs. He's trying to start a movement to put a stop to what he sees as discrimination against men. NBC's Katie Engelhardt spent a day on campus with him.
On college campuses, the odds are really stacked against male students. I basically kind of went through all the female-only programs and compiled a list, and I filed a federal complaint.
You cannot ignore how we got here, because if you do, we'll probably end up back there.
In the last year, the Department of Education has opened several investigations into American universities after complaints that those universities are systematically discriminating against male students.
When did you start feeling that you, as a man, were being discriminated against at USC?
I guess it's really incomprehensible to me that with men being the minority, that all these female-only scholarships are still going on in those colleges. 40 years ago, I can kind of see why colleges would have scholarships or affirmative action preferences for women, but the underlying reality has changed at this point.
So he filed a complaint with the Department of Education, arguing that by funding women's scholarships and clubs, the University of Southern California was violating Title IX, a federal provision that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex.
Colleges do not offer similar affirmative action programs for men in the disciplines in which they're the minority. So women are the absolute majority in, for example, like social work.
It sounds like you're describing a zero-sum game. You think that feminists have advanced the cause of women at the expense of men?
I think for the most part, yes.
I wanted to meet him because the Department of Education is taking his complaints seriously.
In states where affirmative action bans have been implemented for race-conscious admissions, we've actually seen enrollment for people of color drop. We're really concerned that doing away with gender-inclusive programs, you would see the same thing for women across the board.
Back in the late 1940s, women were less than 30% of postgraduate students. Title IX was signed into being in 1972 by President Nixon. But by 1981, women were earning more bachelor's degrees than men were, and they have every year since. That's now at every degree level, by the way. In 2016, women earned around 53% of PhDs. That said, women are still underrepresented in high-growth science and technology fields. They're just 20% of computer programmers and engineers, and they make less money after graduating college.
Should we be worried that women are the majority on undergraduate campuses? Does that indicate that men might be struggling in some systemic way?
I think it's a good thing that, campuses are becoming more diverse.
Kursat has continued to file Title IX complaints against schools he does not attend and has nothing to do with, something that I was surprised to learn Title IX procedure allows.
I initially thought of filing a complaint against Harvard because I think that's kind of like an iconic move. Like people who challenge affirmative action just go after Harvard. But I felt like Yale has more female on the program.
But why is it your business to file Title IX complaints against Yale and Princeton at all? You don't go there. Why not let students there decide how they want their campus to operate?
No, I guess mainly kind of to inspire others, I guess.
In the last year, Kursat has become a kind of figurehead for this activism.
I've been in extensive correspondence with some people who want to file similar complaints. I just want to say first, I'm so proud to be one of your students, and second, please excuse the informality, you're the man.
But if he is a figurehead, he's an imperfect one. Kursat is affiliated with a men's rights group called the National Coalition for Men, and he helped the group file 3 Title IX complaints.
Presented by the National Coalition for Men. If you're a man attending college, you've probably noticed a lot of focus on your campus about the issues of women.
And another thing, in 2015, a female student filed a Title IX complaint against Kursat, alleging that after a short romantic relationship, he harassed and stalked her.
Do I want to discuss that? Ideally, no.
According to Department of Education documents, Kursat filed 2 counter-complaints, also with the university's Title IX office, but USC decided in the woman's favor and ordered him to seek counseling. Kursat disputes the allegations and the university's findings.
To what extent did the Title IX complaint against you motivate your future Title IX complaints?
I'm not sure. I think I would have filed something about scholarships, probably, because I started writing that draft a long time ago.
But critics, and there are many, say these men's rights activists have profoundly misunderstood Title IX.
The Department of Education's regulations specifically allow for affirmative action programs.
The idea is that the numbers don't tell the whole story. Men may be underrepresented in certain fields like social work or nursing, but not because of the same institutional discrimination that held women back for decades, and that today's regulations are designed to correct for. Men are often underrepresented for different reasons, often social ones.
So I wonder, is it the time now to be reevaluating women's-only scholarships programs and policies?
There might be a time, but we're not there yet.
In a statement to NBC News, the Department of Education said that the office is committed to neutrally and impartially assessing individual claims on their merits.
In fact, we may eventually have to discuss implementing affirmative action for men in colleges because that imbalance is not going to disappear anytime soon.
And here are some of today's headlines briefly. Let's start across the pond, where the second largest airport in Britain has been mostly shut down since yesterday. That's because for the past 2 days, a pair of drones were spotted over the airfield. Authorities said more than 750 flights were canceled, leaving about 100,000 travelers stranded, and they still don't know when they'll be able to reopen. So police said there's no indication the incident is terror-related, but they're still trying to figure out who's behind the drones. They say the drone flights are designed to bring causing maximum disruption in the run-up to Christmas. All right, back here in the States, a judge in New York today refused to throw out sexual assault charges against Harvey Weinstein. So this means prosecutors can move forward with the case. This is after Weinstein's defense team tried to get the charges dismissed, saying the prosecution's case had been, quote, irreparably tainted by the New York Police Department. Weinstein, we should say, denies all allegations of unlawful, non-consensual activity. In addition to all the talk of funding a border wall, the Trump administration announced another major immigration policy today. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen said asylum seekers who enter the U.S. illegally will now have to go back to Mexico, even if they're not from there, while they wait for months or even years while the U.S. decides on their asylum claim. Until now, people claiming asylum have been allowed to stay in the U.S., sometimes in detention, sometimes able to work, while their cases play out in immigration court. And those are your headlines briefly. We'll be right back in 30 seconds.
This grave constitutional crisis thing.
The people in the room, they gasped. It then became clear what this was about. That's really, to use a legal expression, that's when the hit the fan.
This is a story that is not well known.
What stuck in my mind about it was this was in the White House.
And the fact of the matter was, he was a crook.
Oh my God.
But it really should be, especially maybe now.
Rachel Maddow and MSNBC present Bagman. Binge all 7 episodes now.
The holidays, sitting down with the family for a warm meal, toasty pajamas, and, occasionally awkward conversations about politics, money, your personal life. Oh yeah, all that fun stuff, and it can get pretty heated. But does that mean they should be off limits? So here's what we did. We enlisted a few members of our NBC family to hash it out. We got Stephanie Ruhle, Ali Velshi, Gadi Schwartz, and Savannah Sellers.
So, how about that Mueller investigation, huh?
How about the Mueller investigation? At this point, it is mind-blowing to me.
Wait a minute, guys. All right, it's the holidays. We're just trying to spend time with people that we love. Is it a good idea to talk about politics at the dinner table?
Yeah.
It is.
Where else are you supposed to talk about them?
Because the whole idea is I respect and love everyone at the dinner table. I should be in a safe environment to talk about anything and not be in a scenario where as soon as I say something, you're going to launch at me and say, well, then you must be a racist and a sexist or a snowflake.
How about if we can get through an entire dinner without the risk of being called a snowflake or a racist or a bigot? Everywhere I go these days, people are talking politics. Why can't the dinner table be the one place where we can talk about other things and I can feel safe and I can feel warm and I don't have to argue?
The reason you can't avoid it is because it's so serious. It's critical at this point.
Savannah, do you avoid it?
Like I would like to avoid it because in a family conversation, you never know. You've got that aunt, that uncle who is going to derail the conversation, and it feels like politics can be the fastest way to do so, and it makes the dinner table not a safe space anymore.
Kind of ugly.
I don't know. I think this is where you learn how to talk about politics. This is the beginning. This is the first step. So when you're growing up and you're hearing the different adults discussing and arguing, and you're like, that's a point, you start to realize that there's going to be differences of opinions between adults.
Why don't you want to say kids? It's the crazy uncle who isn't learning anything.
And everybody's got a crazy uncle.
I'm the crazy uncle in my family.
I also think with family, you feel like they're always going to love you, so sometimes you're willing to push the envelope on how mean you're going to get because it's not somebody that you're just going to write off on Twitter or not have to, you know what I mean? Like you feel like they're always going to be in your life, so no matter how much you push the envelope, they're going to love you back.
But
so it might get really
isn't that
ugly.
the right place then to ask provocative questions and say provocative things because they will love you?
So I know where you guys stand. You don't think it's a good idea to discuss politics at the dinner table, and you guys disagree. You think that it's healthy to do it at the dinner table. Could you see a scenario in which you would think it would be fruitful to engage over Christmas dinner, Hanukkah, any holiday?
Yes. And that is that so many of the ways in which we express our opinions to each other these days are done in the absence of context, often on social media. Going through the rigor of having to say it in front of people you love and have them maybe come over to your side on an argument or at least see it through your perspective.
When you think about how in this day and age we are always on our phones and everything, when you have the time to be with each other, with how important politics have become in our everyday life and with how much they're permeating every moment that, for us, of course, at work, but just in general, even out on the street, to be able to not share something like that with the people you love means you're excluding a whole chunk of things that you're thinking about from being able to bring it to the people that you care most about.
Or the other side, to take your side of the argument, I'm a mom of 3 little kids. I have family members and friends that are in different economic situations than I'm in. And when you think about people's political views, their station in life impacts their views. It's really nice in some scenarios. Don't bring that to the dinner table.
I'm curious to hear if you guys think that money is something that's off limits. That should we discuss anything that has to do with finances or money at the dinner table?
That, I'm clearer on the fact that I think that's tough. And remember, a lot of couples have problems because they don't speak about their finances. So I don't know if the holiday table is exactly the right place to do it, but it is a tough conversation. So you definitely should be able to have that conversation with the people closest to you at some point.
We're gonna move completely away from all that stuff and talk about relationships. Ooh, how do we talk about relationships at the dinner table?
I think that's all we should be talking about at the dinner table. No politics. Let's talk about the juicy stuff. Who's dating who? When are you guys having kids? Yeah, I think I'm the crazy uncle that would definitely be asking.
Oh, you're the crying uncle?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You've been outed.
I want to know everything about. Well, and they're very, very young, but I'm still like, so, do you have a boyfriend?
They're like 6 years old. No, I'll say as a non-married person who has a boyfriend, when I've been at family functions and don't have a boyfriend, and they're like, you know, what's with that? Like, did that last boyfriend break up with you? You're like, please, that's the last thing that I want to talk about. And then when you are in a relationship, like, the prying uncle does not need to know the specifics of my situation right now. You know what I mean?
I'm in a relationship. I have a girlfriend that I love, and I need my family to help convince her to, like, at some point get married, you know? So it's like my rallying the troops.
That sounds like a personal problem. But that's an easier topic for you, right?
Because there's no downside.
You are handsome. You are successful. I'm sure you're dating a great girl. If somebody is in a different situation and they feel like showing up to a holiday is Judgment Day, especially with people of a different generation, especially if you're a young woman and that grandma might think, well, a man completes you, then you start to avoid that subject.
I grew up, my family's Indian, my wife's Jewish, I grew up amongst Italians, so it's like your situation. All we ever talked about was families, and people asked those sorts of questions that some people in society would find prying. But I think we've come full circle, as you said, with young people and social media feeling more free to talk about their love lives and their private lives and their social lives, and that's probably not a terrible thing.
But if they're doing that on social media, they should at least do it at the dinner table. These are the people that will support you when the breakups happen, or, you know, when things are going good, when things are going bad. They're next to you.
Well, I hope everyone feels better equipped to have your holiday dinners now.
I'm ready to eat.
Yeah, me too. We'll have to follow up and see how everyone's dinner time went. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
I learned so much about my colleagues in that shoot, and that day was so much fun, I have to say. Well, that's our show for tonight, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we will see you in 2019. Ah, that's so crazy. That's so crazy to say.